Chou with a new passive indicator. Nana with a faster Molina throw. Hey guys, what's up? Today let's check out the new update on Advanced Server. First up, we have Chou and his new passive bar. You'll now know when your passive is available because of the red bar below his HP. Beginner friendly, right? But that's not all, because they also shortened the required distance to travel for his passive to activate, from 10 down to 5 points. It means you can activate his passive more often. And then there's also the new passive feature that reduces an enemy's physical defense. So when you hit an enemy with his passive, their defense go down for 3 seconds. That's 15 plus your hero's level and it stacks up 2 times. So when you apply 2 stacks, that's minus 60 defense for the enemy. That's quite big if you ask me. Basically minus 1 defense item for the enemy. And since it's defense reduction, your teammates can also benefit from it if they hit your target. To balance this new feature, they've removed physical penetration when using his second skill. And they also shortened his kick range on his ultimate. Here's a comparison on official server. The developer said they're doing these adjustments because he's weak in the experience lane, and he can only kick enemies in the tower to gain advantage. Next is Nana, where throwing Molina became faster. This is more noticeable when you throw Molina at its max distance. Another improved feature is the stronger defense reduction in the late game. Slow for transformed enemies is also stronger by 20%, and transformed enemies will have their movement speed boost removed. That's a great feature, right? Enemies can no longer escape with their movement boost. To balance, they will have to nerf her ultimate skill. Slow effect is lowered from 50 down to 30%, and damage is also decreased mainly on the late game stages. So better Molina, but weaker ultimate damage. Next is the nerf on Moskov. His second skill cooldown will no longer be reduced by basic attacks. As you can see, only his first skill gets cooldown reduction from basic attacks. Big nerf, right? Or does he deserve it? They said Moskov has gradually shown excellent dominance, so they had to reduce his crowd control frequency without affecting his damage. Next is the nerf on the 2 best jungle tanks. Fredrinn's third skill will have a longer cooldown of 3 to 1 second. It will decrease his ability to inflict chain crowd control. The next tank jungler is Barats, where they lower the defense from his passive stacks. That's a total of minus 10 hybrid defense at full stacks. Assassin junglers are really next in line. Next is the adjustment on Wanwan. They lowered her base attack speed from 1.13 down to 1.08. However, this is still a buff because she only has 0.98 on official server. They just toned down the buff they gave last week. Moving on, we have the buff on Eve. Her first skill damage is increased with a 10% scaling. And her second skill now has better slow effects. Another buff for Leomord, where they lowered the cooldown of his enhanced second skill. The damage is also higher in the late game, so 2 consecutive buffs for this guy. Sun-shin gets a cooldown reduction on his first skill. However, the CC immunity duration is cut short from 1 second down to 0.4. The duration is now the same as his animation, and they also buffed his second skill with a shorter cooldown in the late game. Joy will have her ultimate cooldown shortened by 8 seconds. The developer said now that it doesn't gain crowd control immunity, she could cast it more often. Sheep will have more shield when hitting enemies from his first skill. And portals will now appear closer to allies just like this. Natan gets nerfed with a reduced damage on his clone ultimate. Attack effects and damage inherited are all decreased for his clone. Alice's role is now back to Mage. This is a move to prevent her from easily collecting stacks from the new item, Thunderbelt. Remember, Thunderbelt's effect is reduced to 50% for marksmen and mages. And since Alice can be considered long range, collecting stacks was too easy for her, that's why they had to do this. To balance, they've added a few points of base mana to her stats. Next is the nerf on Luo Yi. The frequent use of her ultimate makes it difficult for her opponents to predict her actions. Because of that, the developers lowered her ultimate cooldown to now 60 seconds on all levels. but that's what makes her fun to play, right? Next is the buff on Aurora, where her first skill base damage is increased. The Hailstone, however, is lowered in the late game. It's still a good buff since enemies usually move away before the Hailstone is finished. Jawhead's last adjustment made his laning ability weaker. To fix the issue, they're lowering the maximum stacks of his passive from 10 down to 6. And each stack will now increase damage by 2% instead of 1. With these adjustments, maxing his stacks is now easier, and his base shield is also better in the early game. Gloo's healing effect is back on his first skill. You can now heal minions once again. The good news is that you get more when his first skill hits an enemy hero. Esmeralda gets nerfed with lower defense growth. However, this is a balancing adjustment because of the new item effects of Thunder Belt and Clock of Destiny. It fits her perfectly and it will make her defense too high. That's why they had to adjust her stats. Rafaela will have lower mana cost on her first and second skill. Finally, right? She drains quite fast even with mana items. Next is the adjustment on Alucard because of the new items and talents. They are removing the base damage on his passive while increasing its attack scaling. And the hybrid lifesteal on his ultimate is weaker in the early game. Basically a nerf in the early game because of the upcoming item and talent adjustments. Xavier also gets nerfed because using Temporal Reign will make him powerful. That's minus 30% magic scaling on his first skill. Meanwhile, the mana cost is lowered by a few points. Beatrix attack growth buff is cancelled from last week's patch. The buff will be on his first skill, where it's now faster to switch weapons. Next is the hero, Zhuxin. More butterflies and mana for her passive, shorter interval on her second, and no more shield on her ultimate. Too many adjustments on the new hero. We'll just have to wait for her final form. Next, we have an interesting update for junglers. On the first 2 minutes, any heroes that are within the enemy jungle will have their damage received increase by 20%. As you can see from this example, my received damage is lower when I'm on my jungle side. Another feature is for the jungler. When they are in their own jungle area, their damage taken is reduced by 15%. It means they get tankier when they're on their jungle side. As you can see, my damage taken is lower when I'm on my own jungle area, and it also applies on hero damage. Here's an example taken on the different sides of the jungle. As you can see, I received a higher damage when I was on the enemy side. This means early game invasion will be a lot harder after this update. The jungler is tankier while the invaders will receive more damage. Is it an indirect buff, assassin junglers? Next are the items Winter Crown and Clock of Destiny. Winter Crown gets a minus 15 adaptive attack because of its versatility. Clock of Destiny can only get stacks if you deal damage to heroes. To balance, they will increase the duration of the stacks to 5 seconds. That's 12 hybrid defense each, and it can stack up to 6 times. The new talent, Temporal Reign, gets nerfed. Instead of decreasing cooldown reduction 2 times, they've lowered it to 1.5 times. No more spammable skills. Next is the new feature where you can directly start your practice mode by pressing this part. No more selecting heroes, you just go straight to the loading screen. Last one is the sacred statue. Enemies will no longer see the notification that you're placing a sacred statue. Finally, right? It's bothersome to use it because the enemies will know your location. But now it's fixed. So what can you say about the update? Do you like the new anti-jungle invasion feature? Share your thoughts in the comment section. That's all for this video. Stay safe and thank you for watching.